I almost destroyed my own family at 16, and you won't believe how I've changed. It took me a long time to work up the courage to talk about this phase of my life. Today, I'm 27, I live alone, and I work with vulnerable young people. Sometimes, when I hear one of them say that no one understands their pain, I remember myself at 15, rebellious, arrogant, angry at everything and everyone. I thought the world owed me something, and most importantly, that my mother, Eva, was responsible for everything that went wrong in my life. I didn't realize it, but I used pain as a weapon, and it hurt me more than anyone else. My mother was always tough. She was afraid I'd get lost, so she tried to control every step. But the more she tried to hold me back, the more I wanted to escape. When she separated from my father, Raphael, I was little, but I grew up with the idea that he was the hero of the story. He spoiled me, gave me expensive gifts, and talked badly about her behind her back. I felt powerful when I defended him and stood up to her. It was a sick game, and I didn't see it. I just wanted to be noticed, and I used every opportunity to make my mother feel wrong. When she married Rodrigo, it was like the ground had fallen out of my grasp. I wouldn't accept another man in the house, much less one who tried to be nice. I did everything to provoke. I lied, broke rules, made up stories to pit them against each other. And, worst of all, it worked. Rodrigo began to pull away. My mother was exhausted, and I felt victorious. It was as if I'd won a war, but inside, the victory tasted empty. At night, in my room, I listened to their fights and pretended I didn't care. But I did, very much. I remember one particular night when my father showed up with a new cell phone for me. I was 16. My mother said I couldn't accept it, that it was a way for him to manipulate me. I screamed that she was jealous, that she just wanted to control me. It was the first time I saw tears in her eyes, not from anger, from exhaustion. It struck me, but at the time I ignored it. I chose to believe she deserved it, that it was fair. Today, when I think back, I feel ashamed. I thought I was fighting for freedom, but I was being used as a weapon by an adult who never grew up. The change began slowly, without any big speeches. One day, Rodrigo packed his bags and left. He looked at me before leaving and said, "You got what you wanted, Lucas, but be careful what's left when everyone else leaves." I laughed at the time, mockingly. But that night the house was silent, and I realized he was right. The emptiness wasn't just inside me, it was at home too. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 days. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, just silence. It was worse than any punishment. I think that's when it started to sink in. I started to realize something was really wrong when even my friends started to distance themselves. I was the guy who always caused trouble, who made jokes about everything, who seemed strong. But inside, I lived in fear. Fear of being forgotten, of being left behind like I thought my father had been. And this fear made me do terrible things. I manipulated people to stay in control. But controlling everything is tiring, more tiring than obeying. I slept poorly, had nightmares about fights I'd made up, and woke up with a tight chest, pretending everything was fine. One day, my mother broke down. I remember the scene to this day. She was sitting in the kitchen, her head in her hands. When she saw me, she said nothing. I sat across from her, and the silence was heavy. She just said, "I don't know how to help you anymore, Lucas." That broke me. I expected yelling, threats, punishment. I didn't expect giving up. It was the first time I felt true fear, fear of losing her love. And for the first time I wanted to fix things, but I didn't know how. I had created a wall so high between us that I could no longer see the other side. The first step was small. I stopped lying. That may seem like little, but for me it was everything. I started admitting when I was wrong, even if she didn't believe me. It was a slow process. She suspected everything, and rightly so. Rodrigo hadn't returned yet. The atmosphere at home was tense, and my father kept trying to buy me off. I felt like I was in the middle of a war I had helped start. But little by little, I began to understand that I couldn't change others if I didn't change myself first. And that hurt because I had to face my true self. One day, Helena, my grandmother, called me to talk. I always thought she was on my side because she defended me from my mother. But this time was different. She said, "You think you win when your mother loses, but that's ego, not love." Those words echoed in my head. For the first time, someone made me see that my anger didn't make me strong. It only kept me trapped. I cried in front of her, something I never did. It was ugly, sobbing tears. And she just hugged me. I think that was when something inside me began to heal. At the end of that year, I looked for my mom. She was in the living room, watching TV, and I sat next to her. I was silent for a few minutes until I said, "I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to try." She looked at me with that tired look and said, "Then start by staying." I stayed, and for the first time, we went an entire weekend without fighting. It was strange, silent, but different. It was as if we had found a thin thread of peace and were afraid to let go. I remember going to sleep that night, feeling that maybe, just maybe, things could change. The changes didn't happen overnight. I still slipped up. I still argued over trivial matters. I still wanted to blame my mother for everything. But now I knew when I did it. It was like watching someone from the outside, the old Lucas trying to take control again. The hardest part was facing the consequences. Rodrigo didn't come home. I wanted to apologize, but my pride held me back. Until one day, he came to pick up Mateus and Sophia, and I summoned the courage. I said a crooked, "I'm sorry," without looking him in the eye. He simply replied, "You still have time to do things differently," and he left. Those words stayed with me. My relationship with my father also changed. I started refusing gifts. At first, he laughed, thinking it was a phase. Then he got angry. "Is your mother manipulating you again?" he asked. And that's when I realized the manipulation wasn't just coming from me. I was a reflection of what I saw. I grew up learning that power came from making others feel bad. And to break this cycle, I had to unlearn a lot. It was painful to realize that the man I admired had also used me to hurt the woman who raised me. And as much as it hurt, I needed to forgive him to move on. Over time, I started talking more with Mateus and Sophia. At first, they were suspicious of me, and rightly so. I'd already messed up a lot. But basketball helped. Mateus would invite me to play, and little by little, the anger turned into a partnership. Sophia, with that cell phone-focused look in her eyes, one day showed me some old photos of us together and laughed, "You seem to hate us." I laughed back, undefended. It was true. But now, I just wanted to make amends. And that laugh was one of the first bridges I managed to rebuild. My mother was still strong, but different. She didn't yell as much anymore. I could tell she was also learning to see me differently. Sometimes she'd catch me helping around the house and say a simple "thank you." It seemed like little, but to me, it meant the world. I learned to appreciate these small gestures. What had been a fight became a learning experience. We still had open wounds, but we were walking side by side, not in opposite directions. For the first time, I felt she believed I could be better. One of the most memorable moments was when the school called my mother in to talk. I thought she'd hear complaints, but this time, the teacher praised my change. He said I was calmer, more engaged. I saw the pride on her face, a shy but genuine pride, and I held back tears right there. It was as if, after so many years, I'd finally given her back a piece of the peace I'd taken from her. It was the first concrete sign that I was on the right path. I still hadn't completely forgiven myself, but I could already look at myself in the mirror without so much hatred. Over time, I began to better understand my own anger. It was a mixture of fear, frustration, and a sense of abandonment. I had used my mother, stepfather, and even my brothers as shields or weapons, and realizing this gave me a kind of shame mixed with relief, because I could finally name my flaws. I wasn't just the rebellious kid. I was someone who was lost, who wanted attention and love, but didn't know how to ask for it properly. And admitting this hurt more than any punishment or fight I had ever provoked. Things in the family remained complicated but different. There were still arguments, there was still manipulation on my father's part, and Raphael continued to try to interfere in our lives with gifts and lies. But now I could see the intention behind every action. I didn't need to react. I learned to breathe, to think before speaking, to avoid provocations, and most importantly, I began to recognize when I needed to apologize. And apologizing isn't easy. You expose your flaws, your weaknesses. But each time I did, something changed inside me, and I realized my mother felt closer. Another important aspect was technology. Sophia taught me a few things, and at first, I resisted. I thought it was silly, but I realized that if used wisely, I could create bonds. We started playing games together, sharing little jokes online. Nothing grand, but it was a symbolic step. I was building bridges that I had previously destroyed, and it was at that moment that I realized my change didn't depend solely on my mother or stepfather. It depended on me. I needed to take responsibility for my choices, even if those around me still judged me. Mateus, who was always competitive, challenged me in basketball, and I accepted. Before, any provocation would turn into a fight. But now I tried to turn it into motivation. Every practice, every loss, every victory, everything was an opportunity to learn. And the curious thing, the more I grew, the more I understood that respect didn't come from intimidation, but from consistency and honesty. It was a slow but solid change, and little by little, I realized that the family bonds I had tried to destroy were being rebuilt based on truth and real effort, not fear or manipulation. Little by little, my mother and I were able to laugh together again, not forced, but genuine. The sense of achievement didn't come from winning a fight or proving something to someone, but from feeling like we were rebuilding a bond that seemed impossible to save. Every gesture of trust, every honest conversation, every guilt-free hug, it was a silent victory. I wasn't just learning to be a son. I was learning to be human, to deal with my mistakes and seek growth, even when the pain was still there. And finally, I began to believe that it was possible to be a better person, without masks, without manipulation. Today, when I look back, I see every mistake, every lie, every moment of manipulation, and I feel shame. But I also feel gratitude. Gratitude for having survived my own choices, for having learned to change before it was too late. I still carry scars. Some people never returned to my life. Other wounds still burn silently. But I learned that pain doesn't have to be eternal. I learned that it's possible to rebuild relationships even when it seemed impossible. And most importantly, I learned that taking responsibility is liberating, even if it hurts a lot at first. My relationship with my mother has never been perfect, and I don't think it needs to be. But today, when we talk, I feel respect, trust, and genuine affection. It's no longer a power play. Rodrigo returned after some time, and despite everything, we managed to build a functional relationship. I'm no longer that teenager who sought attention through lies and fights. I'm a man who understands limits, who acknowledges mistakes, and who tries to make amends where he can. This doesn't mean I won't fail. It just means I now know I can try again and learn from each failure. I also learned the importance of recognizing external influences. My father, Raphael, tried to manipulate me, and for a long time I felt I had to choose sides. Today, I see that I didn't choose sides. I chose my own conscience. I learned to recognize when someone is trying to use my emotions against me, and more importantly, to not give in to provocation. This gave me security and clarity. And surprisingly, it brought me closer to my family, because now I can offer sincerity without fear, without manipulation, without needing to be right at all costs. One of the hardest lessons was realizing that my anger came from within, not from what was happening to me. I blamed my mother, Rodrigo, my father, my entire family. But the truth is, I needed to look at myself. And facing that was terrifying. I had moments of relapse, frustration, and old anger returning, but each time I took a deep breath and reflected, I was able to choose differently. I learned that maturing isn't about losing your essence. It's about understanding and dealing with it, and that rebuilding yourself is a daily process with small conscious steps. Today, I write this for anyone who feels like they've lost control of their life, that they've hurt someone they love and don't know how to fix it. It's possible to change. It's not easy, it hurts, and there are no guarantees, but it is possible. Every honest gesture, every apology, every attempt to listen before reacting builds something new. I'm no longer the Lucas I was when I was 16, but I carry his memory to remind me that the path to change exists, even in chaos. And above all, I've learned that pain doesn't define who you will be tomorrow. Your choices do.